Over the last 5 years, I've done countless hours of research supporting fantasy managers just like you and helping them win their fantasy basketball championships and their prize money. But what prevents people from getting those fantasy basketball championships are some key mistakes. We're going to talk about them today and how you can avoid them. Number one, ignoring draft value and player tiers. Far too often, I see fantasy basketball managers pulling up the rankings from ESPN, Yahoo, #basketball.com, Basketball Monster, Fantasy Pros, wherever they get their data. They pull the list and then they go into the draft with that list. But what I want to share with you around expert rankings, they're based on opinion, a lot of them. Now, don't get me wrong. Some projections are mathematical, and there are some systems around how they come up with those numbers. However, I would note that it's not something that you can actually count on because there's so many factors that can impact a player's fantasy performance. So you want to be really careful with that when you're pulling up a ranking sheet and just going line by line, player by player. There are a number of factors to consider when using rankings, but what I would tell you is your league settings, the team build that you're actually constructing in your draft all makes a difference. So take your time and make sure you're willing to pivot and adjust as needed. Player tiers is something we talk about a lot in fantasy football. I don't hear it spoken about enough in fantasy basketball, and here's why it's important. So if you got a tier of players that provides tons of value in one particular statistical category, but there's a sharp cutoff for the next tier, that's something you need to know. So if you're in your draft operating and you see 1, 2, 3 of those guys go off the board and there's only 4 in that tier, it might be worth the reach. If you reach 8 to 10 spots according to whatever those rankings were, it's okay if it better suits the construction of your roster. It might not make sense for someone else, but it might make sense for you. So make sure you're paying attention to the tiers. And if you need some help with that, all you have to do is reach out to me. Before we move on from value and tiers, I want to talk about pairing, especially for category leagues. So that first round pick is critical, right? Who you draft with your first round pick, especially in a category league, can make or break your season. However, who you're drafting in those next rounds, second, third, middle rounds, is very important when you think about pairing them correctly with the player that you led off with. One thing about your number one player, you want to make sure that first round guy could contribute to multiple categories. You don't want to have a guy that's really good at scoring and rebounding. You want somebody that's excellent at scoring, excellent at rebounding, also chips in some assists, and maybe they have pretty good field goal percentage. Your second, third, fourth round players, those players will pick up the slack in areas where your first rounder comes a little short. So you want to make sure you have a balanced attack. But if you need to, in those later rounds, decide that, hey, I know that we're going to stink it up in a particular category, that's when you want to think about maybe creating some kind of a punting strategy. If it's your first time here, I'm Robin Marks, your personal fantasy basketball analyst. I used to work at NBC Sports Roto World, #basketball, and I'm a member of the Fantasy Sports Writers Association. And if you like content like this, please do me a big favor and subscribe to the channel. Number 2, overvaluing last year's stats. A lot of these sites, they compile all of this data from last year and they give you projections of what they believe will happen. And I get it. It makes a lot of sense. However, there are a lot of factors that are connected to this. Are players moving around? Do we have new coaching changes? Did a new player come in town? Don't simplify your draft strategy based on last year's numbers. Another thing you can do to avoid overvaluing last year's production is look at ascending upside young players versus declining stars, right? This is something that I've struggled with even. You think about a player like Russell Westbrook. Russell Westbrook was the man. MVP a number of years ago, also was a triple-double machine, and slowly but surely he's tapered off and his production is nowhere the same. Now, you think about a player like SGA, and he's a great use case. There was a time in my dynasty league where SGA was actually on the waiver wire. His rookie year, when he played for the Clippers, because it's a smaller league, it's an 8-team league, he was one of the rookies that was just hanging out. No one was checking for him. And here's the thing. His rookie year, he only averaged 10.8 points per game because he wasn't in the right system. He had not developed into who he would be. The next year, he had a huge jump. So the second year jump is something to pay attention to. People who didn't make any noise in their rookie season, in their second year, they might have a jump like SGA, for example. He went from 10.8 points per game to 19 points per game. But check this out. This is where it gets critical. In year 3, he jumped from 19 points per game to 23.7 points per game. And there's more. In year 4, he went from 23.7 points per game to 24.5 points per game. But that wasn't the biggest jump. Surprising, right? A player who started off as a rookie averaging 10.8 points per game, and then in year 4 was already averaging 24.5 points per game. You would think to yourself, top is off, boobies is out, hair blowing in the freaking wind, right? He's cooking with hot bacon grease. But there is more. In year 5, SGA jumped from 24.5 the year before to 31.4 points per game. He instantly went from a pretty good player, an all-star level player, to an MVP level player. The year after that, he averaged 30.4 points per game. And last season, as you know, he led the league in scoring at 32.7 points per game and won the MVP. So this is a player, if you look back, his rookie year, he averaged 10.8 points per game. There's somebody out there in your player pool that you're not paying attention to that could be the next SGA. So pay attention, be nimble, and make sure you don't get so caught up in what happened last year. Number 3, don't be a homer. Don't let bias guide your picks. I get it. You are a New York Knicks fan. It's a good big market team. They have great colors. They have great players. Jalen Brunson is the guy. Karl Anthony Towns is awesome. But I wouldn't go out here and draft 4 Knicks players. You want to be really mindful of the roster you're constructing and make sure that it's not influenced by your daggone favorite team. Like, I don't give a shit Sue puppy. I'm not drafting people because I like their team. And you know what? To take it a step further, I am on the record that I am a proud, unapologetic bandwagon rider. I'm going with the team that I want to go with. I'm not rooting for a team in my hometown. Like, I'm from New York. I used to root for the Knicks. I used to root for the Nets, especially when they got KD, Harden, and Kyrie, and I had my heart broken. But those teams are not loyal to you. Those teams are not loyal to me. I'm getting on my soapbox. This is a little bit of a tangent. I'm going off track. Let me bring it back on in. Again, don't pick players because they are on your favorite team. Trust the data, trust the process. Number 4, one of the biggest mistakes that people make for fantasy, they ignore in-season roster management. The draft is important. The draft is fun. It's a critical part of your entire experience, but in-season roster management is the equivalent of like mowing your lawn. Like, you do all of the work at the beginning of the season, but if you don't maintain it, it's just going to grow out of control if you don't take care of your lawn. And it's the same thing for fantasy. So this is not best ball. It's not a set and forget type of situation. And although fantasy football, week to week, you have to make changes for injuries, for bye weeks and stuff like that. For fantasy basketball, it's just on another level. You have to really pay attention to what's happening. There might be players ascending, moving into new roles because of injuries that could actually change the landscape of your league. In order to stay ahead of that, you need to give attention and priority to in-season roster management. Really quick, please consider becoming an MVP member of our community. It will grant you access to our exclusive private MVP Discord channel. When I tell you, we got some fantasy heavy hitters in there, experts in there. We got my man Ben from Fantasy Basketball 365. We got Nick from Fantasy Basketball Insider. We got my man John Fritz, who's an excellent writer. And we just got Matty G to sign on, who used to be the lead NBA guy at Insight Sports. Now he's a part of the Believe in Fantasy Basketball family. He's also a part of the Old Man Squad Network. We got heavy hitters and we're announcing more. So make sure you're in there. And also the actual MVPs who are in there, our MVP members, they provide mad value, like so much value. It will also give you priority DM replies. So if you sent me a DM in Discord and you need my input, I'll respond at least within 24 hours. And also you get priority email replies. So if you email me like, Robin, I got to make this move quick, I'll get back to you within 24 hours. And the last thing, we're doing something very special and new for our MVP members for the first time ever. And I've never even heard of anyone doing this, not just in the fantasy basketball space, in the fantasy football space, hockey, baseball, DFS. I haven't heard of people doing this. And this is something we're trying. We're going to create a private podcast stream for our MVP members. Let that sink in. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to send out a prompt to you guys, like an email out to you guys and be like, hey, everybody send this week's questions. I'll try to do it the night before or a night or two before I record the episode. And then I'm going to answer all of the questions and maybe even bring some people on to ask questions live. And then I'm going to release that immediately just to the MVP members. To become an MVP member, all you have to do is visit BelieveInFantasy.com and select the level of support that you're comfortable with. Now back to the episode. The next mistake we see from fantasy managers is them fearing trades. People are stuck to their roster. They keep it stuck to their chest like, I can't let these guys go. I love them. I want them. No. You need to pay attention, especially when it comes to playoff implications. Sometimes you draft a player that is really, really good, but in the playoffs, maybe they don't have the most favorable schedule. For example, last season, the Dallas Mavericks had a quite sucky fantasy basketball playoff schedule. But players like Kyrie ended up being out for the playoffs anyway. Luka Doncic ended up going to the Lakers. And then players like Anthony Davis, who you drafted because maybe you thought that they would have a decent playoff schedule, ended up injured and on the Dallas Mavericks. So you need to pay attention to these things and you have to be willing to pivot when necessary. But now that you know what mistakes to avoid, make sure you check out this episode to learn how you can dominate your fantasy basketball draft.